going on there, guys? Good evening. It is the Earthmaster here on this beautiful Thursday evening, December 16th, 2021, about 6:20 p.m. California time. And the latest quake on the globe, a 4.6 earthquake over here around this area of the world. Let's go ahead and check out what's going on the latest USGS map. You can see that earthquake way over here on the opposite side of the globe, south of Yemen. Looks like around the Gulf of Aden. 4.6 earthquake striking at 10 kilometers there into that region. We've seen a little bit of activity over the last, I think we've seen a little bit. Let's go ahead and check that out. Yeah, there was one over there, looks like a couple days ago within the same vicinity, a 4.7, roughly around the same area as this one that we're just seeing. Throughout the day today, 24-hour map shows the latest quake down here as well. At least the largest quake, anyway, within a 24-hour period. The 6.0 earthquake down in the South Sandwich Islands region, 15 kilometers. This here kind of on the back side of the trench at about 15 kilometers, a distance away from all the activity we've seen over the last week. The majority of these earthquakes here in the yellow, or subduction zone earthquakes here, kind of deep down into the trench. This one here, kind of the oddball that we've seen within the last 24 hours. And back up against the trench here, a little bit further to the east. So kind of watching that region for potential further movement. No further deep activity or any aftershock sequences following that 6.0 earlier today. A little bit of activity around the Chile region, 4.7 down in South America. Other than that, looks clear up the board through the Peru-Chile trench. We did see some activity off of the coast of Panama with a 5.2. And a little bit of movement throughout the Middle America Trench near the Mexico-Guatemala area. And over here around Puerto Rico, some further movement with a somewhat of a deep earthquake here. 3.8 near the Puerto Rico Trench. That's this region right here. And also some activity just around the southeast or southwest region in Puerto Rico. Looking at the North American plate here, we're seeing a little increase in activity. A whole bunch going on throughout the Texas, Oklahoma, and New Madrid zone. Just seeing a trail of activity kind of stretching linear, if you will. Let me see if I can bring this back. You guys can see, let's go with 30 days. Maybe we can see this a little bit better. I'm kind of watching a little bit of movement here. It seems to have a fashion in this frequency when it comes to earthquakes, and kind of like a line here stretching from Texas all the way over here to the New Madrid zone. You can kind of see it on that map today as well. Just activity really ramping up into Texas, all over Texas. Western Texas looks like they did have a 4.4, a little bit larger than what we've seen for this region. Over the last 30 days within this area, we've seen a swarm of earthquakes kicking up around the Pecos, Texas area. Lots and lots and lots of earthquakes. We'll look at about 183 earthquakes within this vicinity, and some activity up around Midland and the Big Spring region. Today, Midland getting in on some activity as well. Looks like on the north and south side of the interstate that runs through there, and also there's that 4.4. That was followed up by a little bit of aftershock activity, 2.2 right on top of it. And some further activity away from here over to the northwest with a couple twos kicking off there. But man, it's really ramping up here in western Texas up through Oklahoma. A little bit of activity as well. Looks like around, isn't that around Quinton? Looks like a ways away from there. Quinton's over here. Been watching some movement in this area over the past couple months as well. Got to go back 30 days or so to see that movement. This is actually very minimal compared to the activity we've seen a month or so ago, where we've seen a significant swarm of activity take place there around Quinton. Today, though, one little earthquake, 2.3, 5 kilometers below surface. And let's see, I'm not for sure if this is this is related to any type of fracking operations. I would say it is. Just looking at this map right off the bat, there's a bunch of fracking operations all over the place. These little square boxes here that are visible on the satellite imagery. Some of those look old. Of course, the damage is already done when it comes to the injection and wastewater process. 5.0 kilometers. That's typical for the fracking operation earthquake depth. Excuse me. Go over here around the New Madrid zone. Some activity kicking up over the last 24 hours. Looks like right smack dab there on the New Madrid area. 2.2, 12.2 kilometers, and then a little bit shallower one earlier with a 1.5 at 1 kilometer. Eastern part of the country looks pretty quiet, but man, it's really ramping up here within this region. Also down in Southern California, seeing a swarm of movement around the, well, it looks like from the Imperial Fault, just off the Imperial Fault down there south of the border, where we had some activity. 3's kicking up, stretching its way up to the Salton Sea region, where the Brawley seismic zone meets the San Andreas Fault. That activity kind of minimal, but also some activity just on the North American side around the Cottonwood Mountains. Seeing a little swarm of earthquake activity, some 2s and 1s kicking up here, all within the this little Cottonwood Basin, Cottonwood Mountain area. It's on the North American side here. San Andreas Fault in the dark red line. Let's see, a little bit of movement around the San Jacinto Fault area. Nothing significant there. And for the most part, looking our way up north here, just some scattered earthquakes throughout the Ridgecrest and Long Valley and also Antelope Valley area. A little bit of movement around the Tonopah region, but nothing significant. Even Northern California looking pretty minimal when it comes to the earthquake activity today. Seeing a little, what do we got here? 1.6. This is southeast of Fort Bragg. This one's pretty deep though. 22 kilometers, or actually that's that one way up here. That's a subduction zone earthquake way up there. 1.6 at 22 kilometers. Of course, Cascadia subduction zone sits off here to the west within this region here, and that's kind of down dip down stream of the locked area. Have to check the tremor here in just a little bit, see what that looks like tonight. Mount St. Helens shown some activity, some microquakes around that volcano, but nothing significant. And further up north here, not a whole lot of movement. A little bit of, looks like a little earthquake here near Langford, Canada. That one there potentially, well, it's 18 kilometers, somewhat deep earthquake activity there around the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Movement up here in the Alaska region as well. Some activity stretching down through the Aleutian Trench. A couple of small microquakes within this area. Nothing major going on in the Alaska region at the moment. We are seeing some activity. Look at this earthquake here. That one kind of kicked up earlier off the, actually it looks like right next to Tokyo, Japan, 56 kilometers. We've been watching a pretty good swarm of movement just south of Tokyo, just south of the Japan Trench, within this trench here over the last, we can go back to last week or so and see that activity. Looking at about 17 earthquakes in a little swarm of movement. Most of them, actually it looks like all of them, they're in the mid to upper 4 range when it comes to the earthquake activity. So it's kind of ramping up there. This earthquake that struck today, just kind of in an odd area, but just east of, it looks like just east of the Tokyo area. Pretty close there. It's deep as well. So we're still kind of watching this region here potentially for some further large-scale movement. It's just been popping off a bunch of quakes here. Kind of hard to ignore the potential there for something brewing on the larger scale. Still seeing some aftershock activity here around the Indonesia area with a couple 4s and a 5.7, 15 kilometers below the surface for that. Around the Banda Sea. Over here around Papua New Guinea, had a 4.1 at about 87 kilometers. They're kind of deep for this region. And of course, a swarm of deep earthquake activity around the Kermadec Trench, working its way northward to the Fiji area. One of those earthquakes stretching down to 549 kilometers there for that 4.4. A lot of deep movement down there. Over here in the Big Island, check this out again, folks. Look at this activity. Loihi Seamount. That's a significant amount of movement for one day around the submarine volcano out there. 13 earthquakes. Looks like about, what do we got here? Largest 3.2 kicking up. The depths of these earthquakes all over the place. Kind of watching that pretty closely. Nothing new listed on the hold on a second here. Let me see if I can bring up the Hawaii Volcano Observatory. That's usgs.gov, observatories, and then of course HVO. Look at least far as right now, the Kilauea is about the only active, or well, at least the only watched volcano at the moment. Down here around the Loihi Seamount. Of course, this is unassigned by the USGS and the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory folks, but we've seen a swarm of movement out here. Looking at this image here, there's a whole lot of volcanic activity and some new islands being formed out there over time, and no doubt this will continue over who knows how long. Lots and lots of time for this stuff to form, but definitely seeing an increase in earthquake activity around the Loihi Seamount today. We can go back to the last 30 days as well, and looking at that movement, zoom right in here around the Loihi Seamount, about 56 earthquakes, and we don't normally see too much activity out there. At least I don't recall the last time we've seen this much movement around that Loihi Seamount. Up here on the southeast flank, that's very typical, very average, ongoing for since about 2019, if not longer, when it comes to this movement. Today, away from the Loihi Seamount, still pretty active. This looks more like the typical activity we'd see here, as far as the multitudes and magnitudes on the any given day here along the southeast flank. Helena region up here. Far as the movement around Mauna Loa, looks like a couple earthquakes up here. Nothing significant. I would be paying attention here to this region here. Something looks like it could be brewing. I will be keeping a close eye on the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory folks and see if they do any updates on this activity. Of course, Mauna Loa, what do we got here? I'm not going to go through all of this stuff right now. We'll check this out a little bit later. Elevated. Of course, that's all the... Okay. So, moving on, a little bit of activity well off the west coast here of the Big Island with a 3.6 way out there. A little shallow earthquake striking within that region. We haven't seen too much earthquake activity at all, for that matter, within the past week. So some weird stuff going on. Maybe not weird, but some activity that is getting rather interesting here, popping off around the Hawaii area. What else do we have here, folks? Let's see here. We kind of covered this movement. We're going to check out the solar flare activity. I want to check out the tremor map within the Cascadia subduction zone, and look at that. We're looking at 208 epicenters. This is about the highest number I've seen in almost a month when it comes to the amount of epicenters and tremor that's taken place here. And most of it looks like it's at the southern end of the Cascadia subduction zone there in Northern California. A little bit of up in the Oregon area, but that's a pretty big number, a pretty big jump from the lull in activity we've seen over the last few weeks. Space weather. What's going on with the sun? A whole lot going on with the sun. A whole bunch of sunspots there kind of popping up in a trail, if you will, a little train of good-sized sunspots. This is not just one, but looks like at least 3 named ones. They're all growing pretty rapidly. Going to watch these over the next coming days here as these things intensify. Looking at 75% chance of a C flare. M flare sits at 25%. X flare, which is the strong one, at 5%. Someone was asking about what do these solar flares do? What do they do on Earth? Are they going to cook us? Are they going to fry us? No, they're not going to fry us. They're not going to cook us. Just they do have an effect on what goes on, not only with the satellites and whatnot, but they can affect communications and stuff here on Earth. The NASA.gov webpage has a little article on them talking about, of course, the C flares, how they're pretty weak to noticeably affect Earth. The X flares, though, although X flare is the last letter, there are flares more than 10 times the power of an X1. So X-class flares can go higher than 9. The most powerful flare measured with modern methods was in 2003, it looks like. I think I remember that. It was so powerful that it overloaded the sensors measuring it. Sensors cut out at X28. Let's see, what do we got here? So if they're directed at Earth, say if we get a significant X flare similar to this, or right at Earth, the flares and the associated CMEs can create long-lasting radiation storms that can harm satellites and whatnot. Of course, above us, communication systems and even ground-based technologies and power grids. I believe that's when I think we had a loss of power or something in Canada. I think part of the power system went down in Canada or somewhere in the northeast part of the states, if I recall. But they can affect power grids for sure. X-class flares on December 5th and December 6th, for example, triggered a CME that interfered with GPS signals being sent to ground-based receivers. That was back in 2006 there. So I really don't think a lot of this stuff here would harm, us, for example, humans, unless there's like a super solar flare. Say these things join together and create a massive solar flare that who knows why. It would be kind of scary to think about. I don't think that would happen, not with our sun's current energy level, but it is kind of cool to watch the effects of a flare. For example, I'm into CB radio. I know CB radio has kind of gone out of the scene within the last I don't know, 10 years or so, 15 years, maybe more. But they're still kind of cool to jump on. There's a lot of things that happen when you get a lot of sunspots on the sun. For example, skip and radio communications, long distance communications. Normally on the CB radio can chat about 4 miles or so, but sometimes when the sunspots and whatnot appear on the sun, create some super long distance communications there that we're not normally not able to communicate with. I'm talking like thousands of miles away. And there's other stuff that the flares do and whatnot here to the weather. And I strongly believe in the relation of sunspot activity, solar weather activity with earthquakes and whatnot. I don't think it's 100% proven, but there is some relation and a percentage of stuff that does take place earthquake related when we see very active conditions on the sun. But there's definitely a lot more, and we'll go into that one night and just cover complete activity on the solar weather whatnot, and how it affects things here on Earth and people in general. I think it affects animals as well. It's the energy, right? That's kind of where we get all of our energy from, the sun. Let's see here, folks. So looking at, was this put out today, December 16th? There are now 7 active regions in view if you include a new region, tentatively numbered 29 in the northeast. So that's 2911. That's going to be the other one up there. Usually this weekend remains, okay, so anyway, sunspot count could further increase later this weekend when the remains of old regions turn back into view from behind the southeast limb. So It's definitely active. There's no doubt. The geomagnetic forecast calls for calm conditions right now. That could change once we get a significant flare popping off and potential subsequent CME. We will keep an eye on that. It's something to watch pretty closely here. So far, the last events over the last 48 hours, when as far as flares go, was an M1.2. These are the percentages here, once again, that they're kind of putting out. It's a pretty cool site. I like to use solarham.net. They have all sorts of cool images. Shows the coronal holes and whatnot outlined here at the bottom and in the middle. These things here create solar wind and do spark up the auroras and whatnot, depending on how strong they are. And of course, the CMEs do the same, or do a little bit more enhanced activity here on Earth. Look at that sunspot activity. These are all sunspots here, popping up around the bend here too, kicking up pretty crazy. I'm kind of curious to see how far these things will advance and grow as we look towards the next few days. Should be pretty cool, folks, to at least look at and monitor. As far as any danger to us here on Earth, definitely not possible at the moment. Alright guys, I'm going to jump off here. Been playing up in the snow with the kids today up in the mountains. That was kind of fun. Just a little bit on the tired side. I kind of wanted to see what Canada has here for their activity off the coast. I'm not for sure what's going on. Let's see here with their map. Something's going on with it. I can't get their maps to load. I can see the plate boundaries, but I can't get their maps to load. I'm not for sure why. Anyway, this here is supposed to be the West Coast region, northern section of the Cascadia. Showing a little bit of activity out there off the coast. 4.1 that occurred. This looks like when was this? On the 11th, so it's been within the last week. A little bit of activity inland as well. Most of this activity within the last month, so that should be some older movement. I'm not for sure what's going on with their map. I'm gonna have to figure out something different, because I kind of bugging me. I know the plate boundary is here, but it's nice to see the actual land mass out there. USGS not showing anything within this section right here. Alright guys, have a good night. Stay safe out there. We will chat at you guys a little bit later. Live stream is back up and running. And just kind of watching the seismographs here. Not for sure what's going on there with the Chile station. Have been watching some smaller earthquake activity occur in the Chile area. Not showing up on the USGS. But it is seismically active down there in the South America region. Alright guys, have a good night. Peace out. We'll chat to you guys a little bit later.